Hello, and welcome to the Meditation Movement podcast with the British School of Meditation.
In this podcast, we will share all things meditation, including showcasing the wonderful work that our register of meditation teachers are doing all over the country and further afield, and helping so many people benefit from this amazing practice.
Meditation and community are our two biggest passions, and we can't wait to share them both with you in this space.
So sit back, relax, maybe even close your eyes, and don't forget to breathe. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hi everybody, I'm Catherine Banks, one of the co-owners of the British School of Meditation, and I'm here today with Mike Richards, one of our register members, to talk all things meditation and travel. I'm really excited about this conversation because I think Mike and I both have a lot in common in terms of our background and our passions in relation to meditation. Hi Mike, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Really nice to be here this morning and excited for our chat today.
Fabulous. Yeah, me too. So just to start off, Mike, obviously I mentioned kind of within the chat today, we're going to be talking about your business, your teaching, how you bring meditation into the world, which is what we're really kind of interested in finding out more about. But before we go into that, can you just give me a bit of a background as to your meditation experience?
Yeah, so I guess for me, I've been practicing for about 8 or 9 years now. And it's never something I thought I'd find myself getting into, as is often the way. I think, about a decade ago, and I think before then I had, many things in my life were kind of going to plan. I had a job that I enjoyed, friends, living in London. So I had nothing I could really sort of point my finger at as to why I felt so kind of anxious the whole time. There was always this low level anxiety, really busy mind. I'd go through whole days where I would just always be distracted. And I had no idea really it was happening. I was just kind of living this way and had lived this way my whole life. And then when I was, probably about 24 or 25, a friend of mine suggested I use this app, Headspace, which is, very well known. It's been around for some time now.
Yeah.
But he was a guy that I really wouldn't have expected to be a meditator. So he's this kind of quite sort of burly rugby type, and he was like, I'm doing this meditation thing. And to be honest with you, before my preconceptions about meditation it wasn't great. It was like I thought it was some kind of like hippie out there modality, and I was like, that's not me. But anyway, I gave it a go, and immediately after a few days I was like, wow, I can't believe how much of an impact it's having on me, and I was completely hooked. And so it sort of became an obsession of mine pretty quickly. I think within a few months, within about 6 months, I'd gone on my first 10-day retreat, and I was up to practicing sort of twice a day. And then since then, it's continued, and it's just become more and more an important part of my life, really. And I would say that I think it was 5 years ago, when I've been practicing, every day, usually sort of an hour and a half a day. That I just completely changed really as a person. The sort of incremental steps, but the anxiety levels, still there sometimes, obviously, and the mental chatter is still there, but massively reduced. And I just found myself being able to enjoy my life a lot more. I was more productive at work. My relationships with the people I care about all started to improve. And I kind of look back at myself before I started meditating. I was like, that's the most important thing that's probably ever happened in my life, is that decision to use Headspace, and it set me on a path which has, I think, helped me improve almost every single aspect of my life. And now we're 8 or 9 years down the line, and it's still something that I'm absolutely passionate about. And that was, I think, the reason that a few years ago I took the decision to become a teacher as well, just because I wanted to allow others to experience the positive changes that I ultimately had as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And some really kind of interesting points that you've pulled out there that we're going to kind of have a chat about hopefully today. And just before we do, as we, chatted just before we started this recording, we were talking about, the fact that you're a new dad, well,
Yeah.
quite recent, with a baby girl. And how do you feel meditation has kind of helped you in that role?
I think it's been really important. I think the most interesting thing was when I spoke to people, meditators who had babies or kids, and this is before when I kind of knew I wanted to have a baby, but it was on the horizon.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so what happens with the meditation? You know, you're obviously going to be super sleep deprived. There's going to be a crying baby around. All of these things, it's going to be much harder to do. And some people said, oh yeah, you know, and when I had a kid, it went out the window for a few years. And for me, that really wasn't an option. It was like, I know this is going to be super stressful and really difficult. And so it's more important than ever that I continue practicing. So fortunately, my fiance is incredibly understanding, you know, giving me the time in the morning still to practice for, you know, 45 minutes or an hour. This does often mean getting up very early, so sort of 4:30 or 5. But you know, I still ultimately think it's really important to do. And actually throughout the day, if I have meditated, as I have most, you know, almost every morning, it really makes me feel much better than I would otherwise. And I think particularly in the first 3 or 4 months when you're like dealing with a newborn and your life is completely turned upside down, sleeps out the window, and there's this new human about, and it's all pretty overwhelming. It's amazing and it's beautiful, but pretty overwhelming. I think actually just having the consistency of that practice is something you can always, you know, return to. And obviously, and I say this to other people, I think, you know, meditation is not the cure all. You know, if you meditate, you're not, you know, never going to have problems. You're not never going to struggle. But I like the kind of idea that it just dials down any difficulties you will face. And maybe it sort of reduces the levels of anxiousness by, you know, 30, 40, 50%, as compared to if you weren't practicing. And I think that's still a pretty substantial amount. And yeah, I think can help you navigate these kind of challenging and big changes in your life. So I'm super pleased. I've continued to practice with my daily practice. And actually now that she's Rosie is a little bit older and she's kind of sleeping through and stuff, it's already become a bit easier as well to do. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And it's so beautiful again, you know, because we were talking, weren't we, about how that, you know, sometimes people can think it's selfish, especially, you know, when you're a new parent, to take that time for yourself. You know, whether it's 10 minutes a day or 20 minutes or, you know, 45, as you've said. People can think, you know, well, how could I afford to take that time for myself? But as we were mentioning, it's that, you know, recognition that if you have that meditation practice, it's the benefits that come from that are going to, you know, benefit everybody else, aren't they? Benefit your relationships, benefit your role, you know, as a dad, as a friend, as a, you know, a husband, a wife. So it's that, you know, often overcoming that belief that it's selfish that can be really helpful, can't it?
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of the people I work with, this is what they struggle with. They say, you know, I'm enjoying the practice, but actually it feels super indulgent to just, you know, walk off and just do nothing for 10 or 20 minutes in the morning. And I feel guilty that I'm not helping my partner in those, you know, in the period that I am practicing. And I just say that, you know, even though it can appear selfish in some ways, taking this time for yourself, you're actually doing it for the people that are around you, the people that are most going to benefit from you being less stressed, a little bit less anxious, more present, calmer, are the people around you. So it's in a way, it's a selfless act. Even though it can seem that, you know, you're not helping out in those, you know, in the short amount of time that you're not going to be there. But I think often what it requires is just having a conversation like this with your partner. I'm very lucky that my fiance is super understanding. And she didn't actually know me before I didn't meditate at all, but I think does still know that, you know, it's something that really does help me. And so she knows if I do that, actually, hopefully I'll be a bit more present, a bit more helpful, and it helps the family unit in the long run. And so I think it's a really important kind of challenge that a lot of people deal with, especially when they're just picking up on it and they're saying, actually, I'm really enjoying this, but, you know, this is quite a difficult thing to navigate. But almost everyone has commitments and work. And so finding that time, I think, is one of the hardest things I think that people tend to struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you find that for yourself when you first started to practice? Because I know I did, you know,
yeah,
finding that time to carve out for myself was
100%. Yeah, I remember. I think I learned with the headspace. I was actually just like going to the work the work bathrooms and just sort of put my headphones in for 10 minutes on the toilet. So it wasn't particularly like glamorous
Yeah, that's the best.
surroundings.
Yeah.
But actually, it did actually work. And then when I realized how much it was benefiting me, I said, actually, I'm just gonna go to bed a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
and then wake up a little bit earlier. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. And I actually tell people you can do it at any time in the day. But for most people, if you want to make it stick, doing it first thing in the morning is the best bet, I think, just because if you say, oh, I'll do it when I have a spare moment, I'll just see when I have a spare moment, never happens. And if you say I'll do it at the end of the day, you might be tired, or at the middle of the day, you might have something else to do. Whereas if you do it before, other people are awake, if you do it before you've looked at your phone or had a shower or anything, it's like you do that and then it's done. And then you can sort of like, it takes you into the rest of your day. And I think so I didn't find it too difficult in that respect. Once I realized how much it benefited me, it was like, it was a no-brainer that I would make the time and go to bed a little bit earlier. I think that the challenge we have now is we have so many different things competing for our attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, a lot of the people I work with, they'll say, I just don't have 10 minutes in my day. I just do not have 10 minutes. And, a lot of people are very busy. So I say, okay, that's, I understand you're very busy. But what I usually do is I say, okay, if you can just take your phone out of your pocket, and then if you just check your screen time for the last week on average and see how long you spent on social media. And then people often say, I spend 4.5 hours on my phone every day. I spend 3 hours on Instagram. And it's not to say, if you want to do that, that's up to you, that's fine. But actually, you could say, instead of going on Instagram for an hour, you can just take 10 minutes of that. You can still do 50 minutes of Instagram. 10 minutes is not a lot. And I think if you plan ahead and make it a real priority, the most important part of your day, almost saying, actually, when I'm meditating, this is really, really sacred and important to me. I'm going to make this the priority in my life. And if you do that, if you manage to meditate every day, everything else in your life becomes slightly more straightforward and easier.
Yeah.
So you've got to really reverse engineer and actually say, this time where I'm doing nothing perversely is going to make the rest of my life, a much, much simpler and easier thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's just a beautiful way to kind of encourage people to start. And it could just be, 2 minutes, couldn't it, to start with? It's that small incremental practices that we can build up. So that's really, I think really helpful for people to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
So you mentioned in your kind of when you were talking about your meditation journey, kind of, how you got into the practice. And what I'd really love to have a chat with you about before we go into, your teaching is how you have combined meditation with travel. I know that's a big part of your business, your offerings with the Travelling Ape. And I really love one of the things that you said prior to this conversation, which is that if meditation is the inner journey, travel is the outer journey.
Yeah.
And I know you've travelled 150 of the 195 countries, which is amazing. As a traveller or, traveller myself, not got that many countries under my belt, but that really, really kind of interests me. Could you just tell me a little bit more about how they kind of intertwine in your life, travel and meditation?
Yeah, well, I think first thing to say is I'm super lucky that I had for 4 or 5 years a job that I can do remotely. Yeah. So when I'm not teaching meditation, I'm also an economist, but I can do that again if I just have internet connection and a computer. I can do it from wherever I am in the world, which is kind of the dream. I absolutely love it. And I think the meditation and the travel really complement each other. I think for me, travel, I think, you might feel the same way. It's like taking yourself out of the daily routine and the things that you're used to and exposing yourself to new cultures, new scenery, new food. Everything becomes more fresh and more interesting and more exciting. And for me, it's like, if you want to try and be more present, if you go traveling to a new place, it's a completely different experience to, getting on the tube or driving to work and, doing the same things you did the last 4 days. And actually you can just go past a day in autopilot and that, you get home, you're like, was I actually paying attention to any of that? Whereas when you travel, it's the opposite. It's like, and there is actually scientific studies that prove this, that, there are changes in the brain because your brain deems new information to be more important and novel information to be worthy of your attention. So if you do the same thing all the time, actually your brain decides, well, I know what's going on here, so I'm not really going to pay attention to this. Whereas if you're in a new country with new food, new sights, smells and sounds, it's like everything is like conscious experiences even turned up a little bit in my experience. So I think that's why I find it so compelling. It still has, I always thought at some point I would get it out of my system. That's what I used to say to people, like, take a sabbatical from work for 6 months, and I'd be like, I'll do this, and then it'd be out of my system. And I kept doing that. And I'm like, right, I'm actually just going to have to build a life where, being able to travel or, work remotely is something that, I'll be able to do in the long term. And I feel really lucky that I've been able to do that. And, I think at the same side of the coin as well, a lot of the kind of most interesting experiences I've had with meditation have been, in different parts of the world, whether it be, I've been to a couple of meditation retreats in India, a couple in Bali, one in Australia. And so that's also how I think the interests kind of merge. So for me, it's kind of two sides of the same coin.
I think, I can completely resonate with that, having the travel bug,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things. But it's like with anything, isn't it? I like meditation teachers, or often if we try and fight against something, rather than going with it, it can be more of a hindrance. And there are so many benefits that we get from, if you are, lucky enough to be able to do that. But I think, I was listening to something, I think it was another podcast a few weeks ago, and they were talking about having this kind of traveling state of mind. So it's about, you don't necessarily even need to be going to loads of different countries, but it's that kind of state of mind that you get from being on the road. So isn't it? That kind of, you might look for new experiences, or you're more open to new experiences. Whereas, as you mentioned, in our everyday life, we can often get stuck in the which is, for some people, that is what works for them. That's what they're happy with. But for others, it doesn't. So it's often about, finding what works for you.
I think it's kind of having that beginner's mind attitude to, whatever you're doing in life. And I think that, my meditation practice has made me much more open to kind of new experiences, and the idea that, you should always be learning in your life. You're never the finished product. And you could, and I will probably meditate for my entire life. And the idea is that, you never get to a stage where you're like, oh, I've done it. I'm now, expert meditator. I don't need to learn anything else. It's not how it works. You speak to monks who've lived in caves for 10 years, meditating the whole time, and they've described themselves as, just at the start of their journey. So it's a constant sort of process of evolution and learning. And I think that having the meditation practice really opens your mind to those kind of new ways of thinking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. On the teacher training course, we often kind of say, as you'll be aware yourself, one of the trainings that we teach within that course is about identifying what meditation types are suitable for a beginner. But then after that, it's kind of, you don't really want to use different terminology, because we would never say, you're an advanced meditator, because it's always an evolving journey, isn't it? It's not like, oh yeah, I've completed that, I'll move on to the next thing. It's just because every time you practice will be different, won't it? And every experience you have will be different. So it's that kind of just integrating it into your life, isn't it? And that beginner's mind, which is, about meeting every experience, every moment as if it's new.
100%. And I think what a lot of people, I struggled with this in the past, but less now. It's the idea that you can get too attached to how the last practice went. So you can have a really good practice, or what you perceive to be good, which is one where maybe the mind doesn't wander too much and it feels quite pleasurable. And the temptation is to say, oh, that was a good one. Like, I've nailed it. I'm an expert at this, and it's always going to be like this, and it's always going to be easy. And then you sit down to practice the next day, and the mind is kind of lethargic or a bit all over the place. And then you get really down on yourself. You're saying, oh, maybe I'm not so good. And I think for the first couple of years of my practice, that really hindered me. And I know this is the same for a lot of people. It's this kind of achievement mindset. Like, a lot of the stuff in my life, I want to kind of do my best and achieve. So it was like, right, I'm now doing meditation and I'm going to be an expert. I'm going to smash this as hard as I can. And actually, you realize the more you kind of attach to whether a practice was good or bad in that definition, you just start to, get upset or frustrated. And actually now I think it's taken a while to get there. I'm much less worried about how, as long as I sit down to practice, that is the win. That is the success. We have not that much control over the state of our mind in some ways. It's like, you'll sit down to practice one day and the mind could be completely different from day to day. All you can do is sit down, practice. And if you do that, you're winning. And ultimately, if you actually do that, I find you remove the attachment to the session going a particular way. And often the irony is the session is more relaxing and more calming and kind of flows more naturally. But it takes a lot of work, I think, particularly in, if you're living in a city in a Western country where it's all go, 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 achieve, 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 to have one thing that's quite opposite to that. It's just like, you just need to kind of turn up, and then really it's not up to you how it goes. And I think it can take a while to get your head around that part of the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it is kind of counterintuitive to everything that we're taught, isn't it?
Mm.
To achieve this, to kind of, strive for this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best lessons I got taught, and this leads us on nicely to kind of what I'm about to kind of ask you next, was from a monk when I was in a 10-day silent retreat, which was just, when you go into meditation, don't have any expectations. It's often those expectations of what, I want to have this wonderful, blissful experience, and we're chasing that prevents us from, letting go. So that's really key, isn't it? I think.
Definitely.
So, if you don't mind, you mentioned both kind of when you were talking about your own background of meditation and specifically about travel, your experience of silent retreat. So I just wanted to have a quick chat about this, because this is something, again, meditation is different for everybody. Your practice is different. For some people, it's 5 minutes a day. For some people, it's kind of silent retreats and anything in between, But I think sometimes those, especially when we say the word silent, the daunting for people, can't it? And this might feel like it's something that's totally out there, and away from kind of people's everyday lives or their comfort zone. And I was actually reading your blog 2 days ago before we had this conversation, and I really love the quote that you mentioned about your silent retreat from Blaise Pascal, which says that humanity's problems stem from a man's inability to sit in a room quietly alone. Did you find you were able to do that in your silent retreats? Or how easy was it? Because I know from my experience, it wasn't very easy. But I'm just interested to kind of hear a bit more about yours.
Yeah, I try and go on a silent retreat, every year, and I've been on, a bunch of the 10-day sort of Vipassana style retreats. I think you've been on a few yourself. And I think the first thing to say is, if you started meditating and then you tell your loved ones and friends you're going on a meditation retreat, that's when the eyebrows will start to really go up, and you'll be like, are they losing the plot in some way? And I think it's this misconception again that meditation is like, you're going to be sort of blissed out and you're going to be dressed a certain way, and there's going to be all sorts of beliefs attached to it. And actually, the word retreat, I think, is just, is an incorrect way to describe what you're about to put yourself through. It's a 10-day retreat, I think, in the Vipassana style, where you're getting up at 4 a.m., eating 2 meals a day, and you are meditating for 14, 15 hours a day without reading, writing. They even remove words from, if there's in the kitchen, if there's any words anywhere, they remove them so you can't distract yourself in that way. Can't obviously talk to people, and some of them, the stricter ones, you can't do exercise. So they really and obviously you can't talk. So the idea is you're removing all of the things that we use to distract ourselves in our day-to-day lives. And obviously this would be the phone as the key part of it. If you go on the tube in London, you'll see that, you have to wait 1 or 2 minutes to get on a tube. Usually they're very frequent. Everyone's on their phone for that minute. They can't stand just to be standing there and doing nothing. And so to go away for 10 days and actually be left with nothing but your mind, this is where you start to really learn a lot about yourself. You learn about, your mental thought patterns. I think for a lot of people, the experience is different, but you might realize that actually a lot of the suffering that you go through is not a choice, but it's certainly something that your mental chatter is contributing to.
Yeah.
And so going back to the quote, I think that is almost the main learning. You go on a retreat and you're like, wow, my mind is completely out of control. Like, it's completely out of control. It will not. I've got this voice in my head that just narrates everything, thinks about the past, judges everything, thinks about the future, and it's out of control. And that was my realization when, after 6 months of meditating, I did my first retreat in Wales, and I was just like, whoa, my mind is just completely bonkers and out of control. And I need to do something about this. And so that was the main learning for me. It was like, I need to continue to practice. I need to understand myself more, if I want to lead a kind of meaningful and happy life. But there are moments on these retreats where actually you can have really amazing, the kind of peak experiences that you were just talking about, where, you feel incredibly peaceful, calm, you sort of, the body can seem to dissolve, and all these crazy things start to happen that again start to sound a bit out there. But for most people that go on retreat, if you follow your breath for 10 days, some really bizarre and strange things can start to happen, and you can have these incredibly transcendent moments. But on the contrary, a few hours later after that, you can be, and this for me was most of the experience. It was like sitting there with a pain in my back, pain in my knee, sweating. In the retreat in India, for example, it was, a very simple structure where we were in 35, 40 degrees, and there was a fan in the meditation hall that the teacher used to turn off for some of our meditations, where you were supposed to show strong determination. And these are the practices where you're supposed to not move for an hour. And obviously you're just dripping in sweat, your back's hurting, your knees hurting. And it's really difficult to sit like that for hour on end. But the idea is actually you realize in these moments, for instance, with pain in the body, I found you have a pain in your knee or a pain in the back. And if you focus on the pain in the knee and you're saying, oh, this is awful, when is this going to stop? I want to go home, I hate this retreat, and all of this is happening in the mind. But actually, you say, okay, just actually be with what's happening in your knee. Examine the sensations in the knee. Okay, is there sensations of tingling, heat, tightness? And if you do that and drop the kind of mental judgment, the suffering related it can almost disappear. And there's a weird, it doesn't happen all the time. At the times you get to a stage where you actually sort of almost enjoy it, you can sit with the pain, use it as the object of meditation without the associated mental chatter.
Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of my experience of retreats, that they are extremely challenging. I look forward to them in some ways, but I also dread them. In most days I'll have moments of, bliss, and then usually by the end of the day I'll be absolutely fed up. But actually you need to sometimes, remove yourself from the busy world that we live in with all these distractions. And some people say, oh, you're going to retreat, you're kind of unplugging from the world, you're kind of turning your back on it and it's not realistic. It's like, maybe so, but actually you're turning into actually what's going on inside your mind and your body. And I think learning so much about yourself. So, I'd really recommend, a meditation retreat for people that maybe have been practicing for a little bit and they feel like they want to take their practice to the next level. Whereas I think and there were some people on my retreats who hadn't ever practiced before and rocked up to these things. And I was like, I found it really difficult. So I looked at them and was like, they haven't even meditated before. I have no idea how they got through it. But, most people, 80% probably do make it to the end. So.
Yeah, absolutely. My first Vipassana retreat I was very new to meditation,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very difficult. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, I always say, I think it is something, that is about advancing your practice. I would highly recommend that it's, for people that already have a kind of regular meditation practice and you want to kind of go deeper, because it's the discipline, isn't it? I think within that retreat, but also kind of what you mentioned there, it's similar to, what we mentioned around kind of meditating as a new parent. And although, yeah, you are kind of taking yourself away, you're kind of retreating from society for that amount of time, but it's what you gain from that or what you let go, and then the benefits of that then you bring into your life afterwards, isn't it? So it's not just a case of, having especially for a Vipassana retreat, it's certainly not a holiday, I would say. It's a very bit of a difference between that and, going on a nice kind of retreat by the beach, and when both have their benefits. Kind of fast forwarding a little bit, you trained with the British School of Meditation in 2020 as to become an accredited meditation teacher. So was the silent retreats that you practiced, were they prior to you training, or you've kind of practiced a few since then? I know you said they're quite regular.
Yeah. So I've done a few before then. So I've, in the 8-9 years since been practicing, I've done a retreat or a couple of retreats every year pretty much. And so I did the course. I think it was at the end of or just before a lockdown, like in that strange world that we were all living in. And I think we managed to do it in person, which was quite nice. just before it all. I think maybe the really big lockdown that happened or something. But yeah, it was a really great. It was a lovely experience. I think connecting with other people that have, if you're becoming a teacher or want to become a teacher, all of the people on the course are obviously super interested and passionate about meditation. And I could talk all day about meditation with people that enjoy it. So it was a really nice environment to be in. And I think, we learned a lot, and it's been really helpful to me. I think at the beginning, it can be a bit overwhelming when you want to try and turn this internal practice, which is a really kind of private and personal thing to you, and you understand it in your own way. And it's like, okay, now I have to try and understand how to tell other people how to do it. And, I can leverage off my own experiences, but actually what I learned quite quickly is that everyone is so different, that some of the struggles that you faced might be completely different for other people. And I think having that opportunity to speak with everyone about their own experiences, learning meditation, understanding which particular styles work for some people, which styles work for other people, that was like really important to understand earlier on, because if I didn't have that, I would have gone, okay, well, this thing really works for me, so like I think you should all do this one. And actually for some people it really it won't work like that. So I think that was one of the many great things that we learned in the the experience.
So what was your motivation for training to be a teacher?
Yeah, I think it was a sort of slow burn as I started to as the years rolled by practicing, realizing how important it was to me. I knew at some point helping others was something, I enjoyed my other career as an economist. It's a great job, and it's it's meaningful to me in some ways, but I felt that, I wasn't necessarily helping people in any particular way or in the way that I wanted to. And so it was this idea of being able to just give back. And I had a couple of teachers along the way who really helped my practice and really helped my life. And even just my friend, Justin, who was the one that got me to try Headspace. I still see him now, and I just say, that decision to tell me to use a meditation app was probably one of the most important things that ever happened in my life, and has had such a positive impact. So it was just the hope that I would be able to get a few people hooked on meditation. And it is unbelievably rewarding. When you do work with someone or a group of people, I find in groups, maybe, if you group of 10 people in the corporate setting, maybe 2 or 3 of them might then go on to make meditation a long-term thing, and actually speaking to them, I think that's still a great result, because they've, picked up on it, and that could then change their life. But then also working with one-on-one clients as well, who want to take their practice to the next level, or who haven't tried it before and want to get into it. Just hearing after an amount of time that they'll come back and tell you how much of a positive impact it's having on their life. I mean, that's the reason that I did it. And I still think that's a great thing to share. And it's not really to do with me. I didn't come up with meditation. It's been around for thousands of years. So there's no, sort of personal credit involved, but it's just like, this thing has helped me so much. And if I can get as many people as possible to also experience what I've had, which is this sort of transformative impact on your life, I think it just gives me great satisfaction knowing I've helped some people.
What was your favorite part of training to be a teacher?
I think getting feedback. So you will have the opportunity to lead the group in some guided meditations. That's like really good experience early doors, being able to hold the space and practice and lead a group of, I think about 10 people maybe on the course. That sounds about right. And then getting the feedback is so useful, because again, there might be certain things that you think work or in the delivery that actually, unless you get other people to kind of nudge you in the right direction, you might just not realize. I found at the beginning I wasn't leaving, or there's a desire to talk maybe more than you need to. And I think this is going down to in normal social situations, actually the same thing is we do not like silences. People will fill the silence with chatter. Like, you don't want it to be silent for more than a second. And even when you're leading, I kind of found, I need to be talking a lot. And actually people came back and they were like, the sessions were good, but actually you can lead, give people more time to be with themselves. So I think that feedback was, again, really, really helpful.
Brilliant. So tell me a little bit more, if you can, about your business, about the Travelling Ape.
Mm-hmm.
I really love how you've combined your passions of meditation and travel. I think that's one of the beautiful things about meditation, is that we can combine it with anything, can't we? It can enhance any skill or passion that we have, or more or less. I know you've mentioned kind of you work one-to-one with people in meditation sessions, you work in corporate settings as well. You have your blog that you
Yeah.
write. So could you just give us a little bit of an overview about what the Travelling Ape is?
Yeah, so it started about 5 years ago, and this is when I was, traveling a lot at the time, and and I still do have that goal to try and visit every country in the world. But I think some of the more dangerous, sort of war zones are going to have to be on the back burner now that I've got a little baby, maybe for a few years, unless we want to do a family trip to, a war zone or something. So, it started as that, and it was a sort of narrowly a travel blog, and then the blog kind of expanded to other things I was interested in, so sort of philosophy and politics and then meditation. And then when I set up as a teacher as well, I was like, well, actually, I think there's still this link between the two, and so I put my meditation offering online there. And again, it's really grown in the last few years, something that was just a hobby and is now quite an important part of my working life as well, which is great. And as you say, yeah, I work with a sort of wide variety of people. It can be, the corporate setting is quite a big part of it for me. I still work as a freelancer, as an economist, and I worked in the city in Canary Wharf for 10 years. So I think I have that understanding of, what office dynamics are like, and I can speak to people in a corporate setting in a corporate way. I think, they're often going to be the people that will maybe be wary that you'll come in wearing certain clothes or speaking in a certain way. And, I don't think that's for them. So it's to come in and say, actually, look, meditating is not incompatible with being successful in a sort of very normal job setting. In fact, it's likely to, boost your productivity and allow you to enjoy your work more and make you more present at work. So actually it could be this like positive thing. And so, yeah, I'll do group sessions in sort of corporate settings. I work with one-on-one clients as well. These are a wide variety of, backgrounds, wide variety of skill levels as well. Sometimes people are just beginning, but often most of the clients tend to be people who've been practicing maybe with an app for a few months or a couple of years, and they say, I built up a bit of a practice, but I feel I could go a little bit further. And actually having that instruction is something that really can often take your, certainly it was when I was learning, having some one-on-one lessons, really, they can just point you in the right direction. And then on the other side of things, I do some volunteering work at a hospice. I think the same as you have done in the past as well, which again is just a hobby and is something that I really thoroughly enjoy. It's a really important part of my life. So yeah, I think that's it.
I know you've got a book coming out
Yes, yeah.
very soon that you've kindly sent over for us to kind of read. Could you give us a bit of a very background?
Yeah, sure. So the book is called The Travelling Ape: What Travelling Nearly Everywhere Has Taught Me About Humanity, Geopolitics, and Happiness. And the book is like a wide-ranging kind of, I suppose, overview of the world and humanity. And it's all sort of buttressed by my experience going to 80% of the world's countries. And I suppose the key themes are actually your misconceptions about the world really become apparent the more that you travel. I think most of us have perhaps an overly negative view of what's happening in other countries, and this is because the media is overwhelmingly negative and bad news sells, all that kind of stuff. So you have this view about how the world will be and what different countries will be like and what people will be like in these countries, but you actually go to them, and even in dangerous places you realize that 99% of people are good people just trying to live their lives and do their best, and it's not their fault they live in a country with a bad government. And despite all these superficial differences between different countries and actually cultures, my experience and a lot of experienced travelers agree is like you realize the commonality really between all people. Actually, maybe people like different sports in different countries or believe in different religions and dress slightly differently, but actually the things that unite us are much bigger than the ones that divide us. And it's we're the same species, and you go all over the world and you're like, actually we're so much more similar than we think that we are. And I think actually having that and learning that for yourself is one of the most important realizations that you can have. And I think unless you leave your country, if you're just being fed the narrative by media and the television, there's no way you're going to break out of those kind of strongly held views. And then, the last section is sort of integrates my experiences learning about meditation and all these different modalities, which have helped me to become happier as well. And I think the idea here in the final section of the book is that we in the West, we live in the most advanced, economically abundant societies that have ever existed. And yet people aren't like super happy here in my experience. It's like the more developed we've come, actually, people feel more isolated, and mental health disorders are increasing, and we're facing all these challenges. So there's clearly, like, in many ways we're getting things right. I think if the quality of our lives have improved miraculously really in the last 100, 200 years, but actually we're not happy at what's going on here. And I think I kind of use my experience going to all different parts of the world and seeing how things are done there, and actually seeing that material wealth doesn't necessarily guarantee happiness. It can certainly help in a lot of scenarios for sure. But I remember one place in particular, I spent a month in the Borneo rainforest, living with this kind of local community. And, they were facing really big challenges. The healthcare was poor, the education wasn't fantastic. It was really cut off. So, it took about 4 hours to drive to the nearest town. And so, they really faced a lot of challenges there, but people were incredibly happy. They were laughing and joking, and there was this real sense of community. There was 150 people. Everyone knew everyone. All the kids played with each other the whole time. There was this real spirit. And actually, I went there expecting to be like, I'm going to feel really sorry for these people, and I'm here to help them. And I left feeling, for sure they still face a lot of challenges that we don't face in the West, but at the same time, they have things that we don't have, which I think is still this like sense of community and the bond that I think helps them, helps their resilience and helps them to be happier. So the last section of the book kind of explores, traveling to these different countries and what I learned there about, how they do things. And I think the final chapter talks about how I've kind of stolen little bits of advice from different countries I've been to sort of help myself be happier. So I think, meditation, really trips to India and Sri Lanka and places where Buddhism obviously spread, thousands of years ago, and realizing that could help me become a happier person. And traveling to, Italy, and I kind of got onto Stoicism, which is the kind of Roman philosophy and the Greek philosophy of couple of thousand years ago, and trips to other different places, which again, you realize that actually there's so many different ways of doing things that actually you stay narrowly focused on your home country, you're not going to be exposed to them.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like the book I've always wanted to write.
Okay.
You got there first. I'm so excited
Yeah.
to read it. It sounds
Thank you.
incredible. And yeah, how, like you say, how meditation links to it. And I think it is that community aspect is so important, isn't it, for happiness, which is something that some people have tended to lose in our Western society.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Mike. It's been amazing to chat with you and to find out more about your practice and your teaching. And we'll, when this podcast goes out, we'll kind of highlight to everybody where they can go to find out more information. It's been an absolute honour to kind of find out more about your journey. Just before we close off, I'm going to put you on the spot here, so I do apologise. Okay. We can cut it out if anything goes wrong, but I'm sure it won't. If I were to ask you if you could give one piece of advice or say one thing to anybody that was wanting to learn how to practice meditation, what would that be?
I think that's quite easy, actually. It's don't judge your practice by how much the mind wanders. Success in meditation is not about how much the mind wanders. And you could actually say that, even if you sit there for 10 minutes and all that you're doing is the mind is wandering and you're bringing it back, it's wandering and you're bringing it back, wandering, bringing it back, there's still a success. You're breaking that kind of thought pattern. You're breaking that chain where you're slowly over time becoming more aware of your thought patterns. And if you do that, every day over time, over weeks, months, and even years in your day-to-day life, you then start to become more aware of when the mind is wandering. So if you're feeling a bit anxious, instead of just being anxious for an hour, you might go, okay, I'm having lots of really anxious thoughts at the moment now. Do I need to focus on them? Is it worthwhile to do that? Or should I just come back to what's happening in the present moment? So I'd say that if you want to speed up your sort of progress, as it were, although, it's not really how we should look at it, but like the best thing you can do is just try not to be too hard on yourself when the mind wanders. It's part of the practice. It will always be part of the practice, even if you practice for years. And the sooner that you can accept that, actually, it just takes this like tension and pressure away from meditation, and can actually, in my experience, make it much more enjoyable.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a really important piece of advice. And thank you so much for sharing that. So thank you so much. I could honestly sit here and talk to you for another hour or so. So maybe we'll have you on, another episode at another time to chat even more. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your time. And I look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yeah, cheers, Catherine. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.